right, we're good.
Okay, welcome everybody. Adequate notice has been given, and we are going to start here with the Pledge of Allegiance, as we always do, to the flag in Sean's background. Oops. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so just a reminder, this meeting is a little bit different than other meetings in that it's really two meetings within one, because we're going to start out with our tax hearing. And so we open that, and then we have our hearing, and then we close it, and then we start our other meeting. So just as a reminder to folks. So really the first part is if we had any public comment for the tax hearing. So do we have any public comment for the tax hearing?
We do not have any public comment for the tax rate hearing.
Okay, all right. So so then we move on to the next piece, which is the actual the tax hearing itself. And I guess, Mary Jo, do you just want to give us kind of a quick explanation of kind of the tax rate and what we're doing?
Yep. Sorry, just making sure my internet was plugged in and not Wi-Fi. So, all right, good evening. Tonight is the district's public hearing of the tax rate. So I apologize to you that are normally expecting to go first, and I get the lucky job tonight. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, you guys see the...
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. The purpose of the public hearing is to have a discussion and receive public comment prior to the approval. As we said, there was no public comment received, either written or oral, and also nothing for the public comment for the actual meeting. So public notices were posted as required by statute, as well as being posted on the district website. So the tax rate is calculated on tax forms that are provided by the state auditor. We are also required to submit those forms back to the state auditor for approval. So the state auditor has reviewed them and approved them, and the rate it was approved by the state auditor. Sorry. The district tax rate is dependent on the St. Louis County's assessor's determination of the market value of real property, which is land and buildings within the district boundaries, which includes a portion of Richmond Heights. These properties are revalued or reassessed by the assessor every other year in an odd number of years. So last year was considered a reassessment year. We'll see in a few slides how the reassessment fluctuates from a reassessment year to a non-reassessment year. But when that assessed value increases, the tax rate decreases and vice versa. So the rate is inversely related to the rate of these assessed values. What this means is the district will not receive a windfall of revenues when the assessed values rise with the reassessment, because we will roll back our rate. But if the assessed value drops, then we can actually increase our rate. This is intended to provide stable funding. It also, another thing to keep in mind is that none of these rules apply to the debt service fund. We're allowed to set that rate to ensure our debt is paid and we have sufficient reserves, so that rate can float. The district has maintained that rate at the same amount since the 2009 election, so we don't anticipate that to change. Another component of the tax levy is recoupment. And when we talk about recoupment, we need to understand that this is an overall process. It starts when a taxpayer protests the assessed value on their property from the county assessor, and then they win. When this happens, the district has to pay back the amount of taxes that we received on the assessed value and on that reduced amount of assessed value. But as I said on the last slide, the overall rate is dependent on the assessed value. So once that changes for all the properties, so does the amount of our tax rate. So the process to do that is called a recoupment calculation. So since 2005, there's been an exponential number of these appeals and wins of these repeals also. And so the district typically reimburses taxpayers over $1 million per year for the settlement of protested taxes. There were not as many settlements paid to property owners in 2020, resulting in actually an additional $600,000 of operating income to the district for last year. The following table represents the changes in assessed values for the last, since 2012. We've been summarizing them. So as you can see, there were significant changes in assessed value from 2012 all the way through 2019, resulting in significant amounts of revenue recouped. That's the numbers on the far right. 2020 had minimal amounts reported changes in assessed valuations. Because of this and the rollback of the rate that we will talk about, it's not recommended to add recoupment to the approved rate, even though there's a minimal amount, we could probably calculate it, but it's not really worth adding it into the rate. As you can see, there were minimal changes in assessed valuation by class of property this year, with the majority being new construction, and that we'll see on another slide, mainly because of the completion of the Centene development. The increase in new construction, as I said, was primarily from Centene. So that $12,237,000. They actually had the two larger the parking garage in their main building, as well as the Maryland building, was all added to the tax rolls this year. There were also reassessments that were reduced in the values of properties at negative $7 million. So because of that negative $7 million, that $1 amount, there's three criteria that the district can use in order to increase taxes every year. You either, the change in assessed value is one of them, which in this case was negative. The CPI, which this year was 2.3%, or 5% is the highest we could ever get an increase in revenue. But you get the lowest of those three. So since the change in assessed value was negative, and that's the lowest, there's no other increase in our tax rate from last year that we're allowed to see except for new construction. However, I do want to comment that with the extreme increase in assessed value we saw in 2009, if you can see, there was $134 million of additional assessed valuation last year. I did expect much more protested taxes in 2020 than we actually had settled. So there were also quite a few settlements that posted just this month in September. We can't calculate the recoupment on those until next year. And we did pay back $115,000 this month. So my assumption is that the county and the state tax commission are behind, and that we will continue to see some settlements as the year progresses. We will also probably see some protests just because of loss of property value due to COVID and potential client or rental properties losing income and stuff, which is how they base their assessments. So more to learn on this topic is basically the point. The reductions in the rate by property class, as you can see, there's a residential, commercial, and personal property class, represent basically that overall reduction, that change is the amount of recoupment that we added to the rate in 2019. And as I mentioned, there's no recoupment in 2020 due to the minimal amount of change in assessed value. So that's basically, we have flat income, and the change is because we're not collecting any recoupment. The proposed rates by fund, we do have to set a rate for each fund. And as you can see, the biggest change was a shift into the capital fund. And basically, this is due to an increase in capital projects that was recommended during the Prop E campaign. So during Prop E, we basically wanted to build our fund balance, which I will show on a later slide that we were successfully doing, and successfully complete capital projects without taking out additional debt. Why is that switching 2 slides? Apologies for that. So the change in the projected receipts from the original budget is approximately $3.65 million. That is primarily due to the Centene project. So that was an abated project, and it was substantially completed as of January 1st. In theory, when you looked at it, it looked like it was pretty much done. And the county had actually fully assessed both parcels. So, however, in order to receive their abatement, Centene must file a certificate of substantial completion with the city of Clayton before January 1st, which was January 1st, 2020, in order to receive their abated taxes. So as a result, neither parcel received an abatement because the overall, from what I was told from the city, is the overall project wasn't completed. So they're assuming they will apply for it by the end of this year. But since they did not get their abatement, we get to keep the full taxes on the property for this year. And then in addition, the budget, I did project a 20% rollback, but due to the pandemic and the additional expenses that we're incurring, it is recommended just to maintain the same 15-cent rollback that was approved last year. And then we'll look at it in the future to see if there's any other adjustments we can make.
And Mary
So as I
Jo,
said-
how many years is the Centene abatement once they do turn in their paperwork? Is it 5?
No, I think it's, shoot, off the top of my head. I think it's 20, but it could be 10 for some reason. 10
Oh my God. So once they file the paperwork, that 1.4 million that we're getting this year disappears, right?
It's right. It's actually a little over 800 and something. The other 600 and something is the 5 cents that we're not rolling back. So.
Okay.
But it's not fully abated though, right? Isn't it a percentage?
Yes, it's a 40% abatement.
So it'll just drop.
Yep.
Yeah.
So these projections do include the needlepoint bipolar ionization system, the contribution for the center, some potential additional staffing that we will bring forward if we see we need to add it, and then that'll also be a budget revision that the board will approve, and then additional operating expenses that we're still anticipating that might come forward. So, and it also includes the potential abatement of Centene as it moves forward as well. So, any other questions?
And your projections in future years are based on a 20-cent rollback versus the 15-cent rollback for this year and 2019?
No, actually, the way the projections work is based off the current year, and the only thing I did pull out was Centene. So no, it is based on the 15-cent.
Okay, so the 15-cent rollback you include you left flat for the
Yep.
21 forward.
Yeah,
Okay.
for the 5 years. Yep.
Anybody else? Actually, Mary Jo, we stop sharing your screen so we can see everybody's face. But any other, thank you. Any other questions? Is it, I just want to make maybe a comment / question, but you know, Mary Jo, the 15, I want the public to know that the 15 cents represents about $2 million, right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
we're rolling back taxes about $2 million. So I mean, that's important for the public to know. And that's to the credit of you and your team and the great fiscal management that you have done, and also some things that we didn't expect that are good, and also making sure that we don't get caught with some COVID expenses that could happen as we move forward. Any other questions? Okay, so let's move to the approval. Gary, will you read the motion, please?
All right, this is a long one, y'all, so like buckle in here, bear with me. I move that the Board of Education adopt the tax rates by category as presented with the blended tax rate for the School District of Clayton for 2020 in the amount of $4.4134 to be distributed with a special revenue fund rate of $2.3530, general fund rate of $1.2499, capital projects rate of $0.1875, and debt service fund rate of $0.6230.
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. And again, thank you, Mary Jo, for all your work here. That was really good. So again, this is, at this point, really what we're going to do is adjourn this meeting, which is the tax rate meeting, and move to, so we have an action to adjourn this meeting, and then we'll move to the next. Go ahead, Gary, if you would read 5.01.
All right, I move that the Board of Education adjourn the tax rate hearing.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so we've adjourned that meeting, and now we're going to call to order the kind of the regular meeting, if you will, and adequate notice has been posted for that also. So we're calling that to order, and we are going to start with recognizing our own, which is actually Clayton High School and the awesome National Blue Ribbon Award. I'll hand it to Sean.
Thank you, Joe. So yes, we wanted to take this opportunity because last week we found out that Clayton High School was named a National Blue Ribbon School for 2020. And there's only 7 schools in the state that received this honor. The honor was named as under the exemplary high performing schools category. And so it is really truly an honor to be nominated for to be a Blue Ribbon School. And then you have to go through a pretty comprehensive process. The honor is based off data, but then you also have to talk about what unique qualities your institution provides for students. And so there is a very, very comprehensive application process, and it's not a given, and you have to go ahead and submit a lot of information. And so we want to recognize the students, the staff, and the administration of the high school for this really great honor. We'll have some type of celebration once we're able to do that in person. But I want to recognize a few people here who are with us tonight, and that's our principal, Dan Kaczewski. And then we have his administrative team who is also here. I want to recognize them as well. We have Regina Moore, and I'm not sure if Regina's on the screen. And then we also have Janelle Dansky, and I don't think Janelle was able to be with us tonight. But we also included Steve Hudson, who is our athletic director, and then Tashawn Young, who is our assistant athletic director and activities director. And maybe you guys can turn on your screens. But we want to say thank you to the administrative team at the high school for leading such an incredible school, providing our students with incredible experiences. One of the other aspects of our school is the high quality staff that we have. And so we wouldn't be getting this honor unless we had such amazing talent in our classrooms. And so, Dan, I don't know if you want to say anything about this honor or just to say anything about the process.
No, thank you, Sean. No, we're really, really excited. And I think that this honor is a testament to the entire school community, because without a community so vested in education, without such an amazing staff, students, family, administrative team, this certainly wouldn't be possible. And Clayton is a great place and has been for a long time, but I think it's particularly exciting that this is only the second time that Clayton has won the award, and the award's been in existence since 1982. We also won in 1984, but we haven't won since. So, I think that it's a real testament to everyone that works really, really hard. And that one of the things that I wanted to make sure were that Steve and Tashawn could be here, because while the data and test scores and assessment kind of qualify you for the application, or that the application itself is really about all facets of the school, and it looks at pedagogy, it looks at curriculum, it looks at academic offerings, it looks at athletic offerings and activities and opportunities for kids. So it truly is an all-encompassing effort and the result of the work of so many.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. And thank you so much to Sean and Steve for also being here and your unbelievable service. I have you on there. You guys have been amazing too through all these issues with athletics and just getting us through all that. I'm just really proud of you as well. So thank you for your leadership. And Dan, please share with your other administrative team and your administrators and students how proud we are of them.
I certainly will. Thank you.
And I just want to say on behalf of the board, Dan and Tashawn and Steve and Regina, and Janelle, who are not here. This is really awesome. And what, Dan, you didn't say that I think is important too, is there are very few schools that win it twice. And so for Clayton High School to have won it twice is actually quite a big deal. That's a very select list. So that's very impressive too. So very well done to all of you. Thank you. So we're going to move on to Superintendent Communications, which is 8.01. Sean.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for this part of my communications. Okay. Are you able to see that okay? I'm assuming you are. So tonight, what I want to do is, first of all, good evening, everyone, and want to really focus the Superintendent Communications on the current reality of our Return to Learn plan, and give you also an update around our work around equity. But I think it's really important for the board to understand all the work that is happening with our Return to Learn plan. And again, I'm just so appreciative of working in a district that is so dedicated to our students and their learning. And these last 6 months have been a true test of our leadership. And I'm just very, very appreciative of the team that I work with. So currently we are still in the remote phase of our Return to Learn plan. And even though we have been in that remote learning phase, we have had students in our building since day one. I want to commend our special education teachers who have been providing services to our students since day one. Our administrators have been able to come up with different strategies for having other students in the classrooms to support them during this remote learning. And so it hasn't been like our buildings have been empty of students and teachers. A lot of our teachers have been working in the buildings since the first day of school. And we have been using those guiding principles that I shared with you at the beginning of the summer to really make the decisions and thinking about the health and safety of our students and staff, and making sure we're still providing high quality education, making sure we're taking care of the social emotional well-being of our students, making sure we're looking at through an equity lens when making decisions, and then also knowing that we have to be adaptable if things change in the public health sector. And so we are, I know that we are at this point we're working and moving into that second phase, which would allow some of our students back in our schools, and we're starting with our youngest learners. And I just want to say that I know that bringing students back and bringing teachers back in a setting on an everyday basis for our youngest learners, that is definitely going to bring some fears and some worries. But I want to assure people that we are taking into consideration every aspect of risk mitigation. I feel it's my personal responsibility to provide an environment that is going to be safe for people, because when people feel safe, then that's when we're able to learn. And so I just want to make sure that I'm saying that I recognize those fears, but we're doing everything we can to quell those. Our why behind this moving to bringing back our elementary students was based off a recommendation that we got from St. Louis County Health Department. We've also seen that the data for our youngest learners is very positive, and it is aligned to those CDC guidelines saying that there is minimum risk for bringing students back, and there is low risk. And so we also feel it's very important for our students to have more interactive direct instruction. Our teachers have been doing an amazing job doing the remote learning, but there's nothing like being in person with our students, providing them feedback, providing differentiation, and making sure that we're checking in on those social emotional needs that they have. And then also we've been doing everything possible to make their environment safe. And so we feel very confident about what that's going to look like. I want to just remind everyone that we are going to start next week with our kindergarten. On October 5th, we're going to have our orientation for kindergarten. And then on October 6th, they'll start full days. And the way that we're able to do that is that we did get an architect to look at all of our spaces and saw that we were able to fit all of our students in to the classrooms, those students who are in responsive learning. We're still going to have a group of students who are learning at home, and that's their choice. And but we are able to fit everyone in, and that allows us to have continuity of education and students coming 5 days a week. The following week, we'll have first and second grade go through orientation, and then they'll start full days. And then we'll have a series of orientations for third, fourth, and fifth grade, and having everyone going full days starting October 26th. And again, I will say that I have to recognize our teachers for what they've done during remote learning, because this has been very different than what we did in the spring. And the synchronous part of our learning has been very successful. But now we're at that point where we're looking at transitioning our students back into our schools. As I said, we do have students that are learning at home still. And we have given families the opportunity when we made this announcement that we're bringing our youngest learners in to either move from responsive learning to learning at home, or to come from learning from home and go back into responsive learning. So last Friday night, I worked with the building principals and Milena, and we were able to look at honoring those requests, and it basically was a wash, and we're able to honor those requests. We also know that it's really important for us to be making data-informed decisions. And so we are on our Return to Learn website, we have published a new dashboard that's keeping the community informed of the number of cases of COVID that we have in our community, number of people who are quarantined. And the reality is that's going to happen. And we are going to do everything possible to make sure that we're doing effective contact tracing. And we are going to be adding some staff to our nursing program, so that way we can do that effectively and have someone that's dedicated to that. We are also looking at cases for the district, in the district region, and within St. Louis County. And so we have seen that it's very positive in terms of students at younger ages. The cases and the rate of positivity rates are really low. We are still looking at students that are in that age range at the high school and middle school, and we'll be making decisions soon about those levels. But they still, especially at the high school, those numbers still look high, and we're taking a close look at that. In terms of risk mitigation, we have been very thoughtful about providing personal protective equipment. We have been looking at different face coverings. We have been providing plexiglass, some different types of barriers. We're also looking, as I said, our classrooms have been designed with social distancing in mind. We have class desks that are separated. We also have making sure that we have new procedures and orientations in place. And those new procedures could be something in terms of the way the hallway directions are work, or limited use of staircases, bathroom procedures, lunch procedures. And then the other thing too is we're adding different layers of protection by looking at structural changes, such as schedules, or we're also looking at adding the needlepoint. We also are incorporating needlepoint ionizer, which is just another layer of protection for our students and staff. And then the other thing is having the right cleaning procedures in place. And we have been able to examine and look at what cleaning tools are we using in terms of going into the spaces more often, making sure we're shifting staffing to work during the day, and then also looking at our cleaning products. And we have switched some of the cleaning products so that way we're meeting clean standards, green standards, and also making sure that the products kill COVID. I also think it's important to know that we have created a multi-page audit checklist that we are going through each of the buildings, and we are conducting those audits with the building administrators and making sure that all of those items are in place and holding everyone accountable to those. And so, and as we go through this, we have found that there are some things that we need to modify or change, but we are making sure that we're holding one another accountable through this checklist. The other thing I think is
Hello, Merrimack community. I am Patrick Fisher.
the other thing I think is really great that we've done is that we've created videos for each one of our elementary schools. So that way so families can know how things are going to look, what changes are going to be made. And so I just want to show a few segments to the board so that way you can see what these look like.
The principal here at Merrimack Elementary, and we are very excited to be welcoming everybody back into our building. It's been 6 long months, and we can't wait to start seeing our kids back in our building and learning and growing with us. As we get ready to welcome all of our students back, we want to make sure that we take some time to go through some of the procedures and some of the different things that may look slightly different than when you were here last. So we want to make sure that we're all able to do what we're supposed to do to keep each other safe and make sure we're in the best environment possible for all of us to learn and grow.
So
we have designed traffic patterns during school hours to decrease crowding and enable the flow of students and staff to move in a single direction. In addition, stairwells will also have designated directions during the school day. Students should look for markings and signs to aid with traveling safely inside the building.
Abide by St. Louis County spatial recommendations. All desks will be spaced apart to maximize social distancing, and there will be designated areas to place their belongings. Teachers will have a marked teaching zone in front of the class or near their smartboard. They will be allowed to move throughout the classroom while maintaining proper precautions, including plexiglass dividers when interacting in close proximity. If students need breakfast, the cafeteria will provide grab-and-go food items to purchase. Once students get those, they must head directly to their classrooms to eat. At lunchtime, if children don't bring their lunch,
It's always important to make sure we're wearing our mask properly. So in order to wear your mask properly, we want to make sure it's above the nose, not below the nose, and under the chin, and also behind each of your ears.
So I just wanted you to have a little bit of a segment of what those are going to feel like. And we're trying to do everything possible to make sure people feel confident about our transition back to the elementary schools. I feel confident about the risk mitigation measures we've put in place. We've had medical experts who have given us advice about what are some ideas or some things that we need to think about. An example of that would be Captain Elementary. We had a medical expert go through our building because Captain is a different type of building in terms of being an open space, and felt that it was what we've done in terms of risk mitigation was going to be very highly effective and keep people safe. The other thing we've done with medical experts is we've had a doctor who has come in and did a question answer session with our staff in order for them to ask some questions and to address some of their concerns. I feel our buildings are ready. We did all 3 of those audits over the last few days. And we also going to be opening the Family Center on October 12th. And so we will be doing an audit of that building as well. And so just wanted to make sure we're including the Family Center, remember them. And then so the other thing too is we've had some other districts that have started already and some other private schools, and we're seeing what others are doing well and making sure we're learning from them. And then we're also being thoughtful about our staffing, making sure we have the right amount of staff. And so we've been very appreciative of the board being able to provide some additional funding for those. And we will continue to examine that and to see where we could save some money, but also making sure that we're making sure we're getting what we need. And we may have to ask for additional funds so that way we can provide the best experience for our students. And then the other thing too is that we do have community support. We've had people who have shared in the community that they are excited about supporting our students getting back to school. But that community support means that people have a responsibility to follow all those risk mitigation measures outside of the school day. So that way, when students are coming back into school, we know that they're healthy and safe. We're also expecting people to do those daily self-checks, so that way we're not sending students to school who are ill. What's next for us is that we are going to have to make some decisions around Wydown and Clayton High School. And so we'll continue to look at the data, and we'll be putting out some information to our families soon about the timeline for that. And then, but I do feel that we have been preparing to make sure that we prepared to, if we get back to the buildings, we are not exactly sure if that will be a hybrid schedule or not, but we are being prepared for that by making sure we have all the proper equipment ready to do that. So we'll be sending out more information as soon as we have that solidified. Again, how will we know? Again, for the high school, we'll continue to look at St. Louis County recommendations. St. Louis County did put out a recommendation that we should be looking at our middle schools, but they said to make sure that we're doing that incrementally and not starting all at once. And then the other thing too is that we are going to be looking at data again from the region to make those decisions. I'm hoping that by next week, we will be able to send out that timeline to our families so that way they can prepare. But I want to be realistic is that there could be, we have said that we wanted to start second quarter with our secondary schools. But the reality is that we may be pushing that back a little bit based off of the data that we're seeing. And so we will make that determination and make sure that we communicate it in a timely way. And again, I just want to emphasize to those people who are watching the meeting and also to the board is that we are going to expect people, we have to have collective efficacy around this and responsibility around this work. And so it's not just what's happening within the schools, but it's happening with what's happening in our community. And I will assure the board that we have done everything possible to try to make sure that we're having a safe and conducive environment that's going to keep our students safe and our staff safe and healthy. And I feel very confident about the way we're moving forward. So I'm going to stop right there. And I am going to ask, the last thing I'm going to ask to do is have, we always want to make sure we're giving an update about our work around equity as well. And so I did ask Cameron to prepare just a quick update about some of the work he's been doing. So that way the board's informed about that as well.
There we go. All right, thanks, Sean. Yeah, I've been getting a lot done. I've led a lot of development sessions. The most recent one that I've led was with the district leadership committee. Where we really centered in on student experience and how each student's experience varies. Just based off race and identification and things like that. And we had some great discussion. And one thing that's been awesome is just the entire district staff as a whole has really been buying into really developing that equity lens. One thing that I push is no one was taught how to actually practice empathy and equity in the classroom, from an anti-bias, anti-racist lens. So a lot of this kind of training and learning that we're doing is relatively new. But the staff has been taking it on, pretty well. And, I've also been jumping into a lot of just different committee meetings from, curriculum committees and the different disciplines and things like that. And, really looking at a lot of the opportunity gaps we have and diving into kind of where we're missing the mark and, where we need to hone in terms of the efforts in order to get rid of some of the inequities that exist. Today was the last day we finishing up our building equity audit. So, after meeting individually with each administration and meeting with teachers in each building, I put out an audit survey to the whole staff, as well as myself through my assessments to kind of look at things from a staff lens, a cultural environment lens, pedagogical lens, as well as curriculum, and really giving an audit to each school and trying to figure out where are the areas in which each school needs to really concentrate on in terms of equity and kind of leading our equity efforts within each school from the results from the audit. So that went well, and we're in the process of breaking down those results, and we'll have a more in-depth analysis on that at the next meeting. Again, I've been reaching out to the community as well. The awesome thing is I've gotten a lot of calls and a lot of emails just in terms of people wanted to meet and talk and kind of just discuss, kind of what my equity vision is, and, as well as gaining information from different stories and testimonies that people have around the district. So, I've really been able to familiarize myself with everyone, and really get to know the stories within the district that, hopefully we can bring some changes to. And then last but not least as well, next week, I'm looking at, the equity portion of the website and really looking to revamp that. So I've got a lot of new information that's going up on there, as well as a bi-weekly blog that I'm gonna keep going on there, so that, the community is in tune with, kind of the equity work that we're doing on a regular basis and some of the things that I'm teaching, and, to get some of the information out there in terms of, how we want to view equity in the district, kind of a way to keep everyone in the loop. And that'll be followed with, social media presence on the major social media platforms as well, to highlight different things that are going on, within the district and with work that I'm doing, so that everyone kind of has a lens, into kind of what's going on. I've also started to, meet with affinity groups within the district in terms of kind of getting the experience in the district from a staff standpoint, as well as starting to make meetings with students, and different parent groups as well. So really starting to build up that affinity group and kind of empower, groups of parents and groups of people who might not have been empowered in the past. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. Looking forward to starting to work with the board individually next week, with a lot of good work that we have planned as well. So yeah, things are going really well, making a lot of progress. Starting to implement and, make myself known within the district, and, all of our staff has been, very awesome, and being forthright and requesting, my assistance, and, having me work with them one-on-one in terms of, creating equity, within the district. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Cameron. So before I turn it over to Caitlin for her report, I just didn't know if the board had any questions about the return to learn portion and any clarification. I can see your faces now. I felt for about 10 minutes, I was just staring and just hoping that you're on the other side. When I was sharing my screen, I was like, I hope someone's hearing what I'm saying. So it was a little awkward. So I just want to see any questions about that.
Joe, I'll just say thank you. I think you guys have done a good job, getting everything ready. I know there's not a good answer, and it's a tough decision. So I just want to say thank you to you and your team and your extended team for the work that you've done here. I can tell you that my two elementary boys are pretty fired up. I've been trying to soften expectations and tell them the classrooms are just not quite as cool as they used to be. But they're still very excited to come and kind of get back to something a little bit more akin to what they're used to. So thanks you.
Go ahead, Stacy. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to echo a little bit of what David said. Sean, thank you so much. I know this had to be a tremendous amount of work, and I appreciate all of it. I appreciate that your decisions were data driven and in coordination with medical experts and the county health department. So thank you for that. I did have one question though. You said, I guess, when you announced this to elementary families, that you gave them a choice again if they wanted to remain in virtual learning or go to responsive learning. I'm just wondering, how did that work with staffing? Were teachers given a choice again, or how did you work? Which ones were going to do virtual learning versus responsive learning, if those numbers matched up or not?
So all of our staff are staying in their same spot. So if teachers were in learning at home, they're staying at learning at home. And then the staff who was in responsive, they are coming back into the classrooms. And so when we put that out there, we told families that if you were going to change, that would mean that you would have a different teacher placement. And so once we went through it all, we let people know that, and our building principals have communicated those changes. And so we didn't have to switch staffing. We have had to add additional interns, which I think is a good investment to support students in different ways. And we might have some additional staffing changes later on, but right now the staff stayed in their same spots.
Okay, great, thanks.
Gary, did you have something? I think I saw your hand. Jason,
so
I'll go to you next.
Thanks for the update on all this, Sean. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's gotten very specific questions about elementary, middle, and high school level building questions. So I just want to talk a little bit about, or ask the question, how do you want us to direct those questions when people ask about what's going to happen in this school building and when? What's the best way to push them to the right source of information on those things? Because there have been questions, including some from within my own family, that I haven't known the answers to. So I want to make sure I'm giving people accurate information. If that makes sense.
So I would start with the building principal and have them contact the building principal first. But they're welcome to also, I would start with the building principal, and the building principal will then, if they don't have the answer to something, they will definitely reach out to us to get that answer. So I think that's the best place to start. I feel right now with our elementaries, and since we're starting them, we have been dedicating a lot of time to our building leaders in our elementary level. And so I feel like they will be very capable of answering any question. When we're coming to middle school and high school, we still have some unanswered questions that we still need to work on, and we will support them as well. And but yeah, I would start with the building principal.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, did you have something?
Yeah, question for you, Sean. Just want to understand when we're looking at the information, like the statistics from the CDC, how much navigating have you had to do, knowing that that at the federal level there's been conversations about suppressing information about statistics and information that comes out about COVID. Have you had to consider that?
Yeah, and so it's interesting, and I appreciate the question, because we've had to become experts in areas that we have not been able to ever been experts in, and so we have to trust the people that are in our community that are the trusted community supports, like the St. Louis Public Health Department. And so we know that there's also people who question some of the data that comes back. Is it reliable? I think that one of the things that's been really helpful is that we've been able to get the support of other medical experts who have been able to create dashboards for us. So we have people from Mercy Hospital who are helping us develop dashboards for not only just for Clayton, but for everyone in St. Louis County. So like this week, we got a new tool that we can use that is giving us some more up-to-date information. And that's the thing, is we have to trust the data that we're getting and the recommendations from experts, but then it's our responsibility to take that data and determine if this is the best thing for us. And so after looking at the comparisons with the new CDC indicators and the thresholds that they have developed for risk, and looking at the data in our community, we felt confident about our elementary and family center. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about the reliability of the data, but I feel very confident that we're getting it from multiple sources and trying to look at that inter-rater reliability with it. So,
Gotcha. Yeah. I just thought that there might be some families out there who might have a question about that same thing. But I think, like you just said, the fact that you got a mix of different resources you can go to locally here, that you're not just using one particular data set. So
yeah,
appreciate that, man, and good work, guys.
Also just put out a new dashboard as well. So we have that as another resource that just happened this week as well.
Gotcha. Good work.
Our Return to Learn website, we're putting all the data on there as well as our dashboard for us personally, because from now that we're starting, a lot of our data is going to be informed by what's happening in our schools. So if we're seeing something in terms of cases in a school, we're going to ask ourselves why, and then what are we going to do about it? And then if we have to make a decision about going into a different phase. But so we're really going to be looking at our local data very closely.
Thanks.
Kim or Amy or Caitlin, any questions?
No, great work, Sean, with you and your team. And I just echo what everybody else has said, especially David, that there's no not easy to make any of these decisions, and sounds like you guys are looking at all of the optionalities. Have you guys considered like any de-densification strategies in terms of arrivals and dismissal times for students, especially with some of the smaller elementary schools? Are all students arriving when all the students, I know you're staggering how you're starting up. Well, does everybody arrive at school at the same time and leave school at the same time?
So that they are cognizant of that, and what they've done is they have designated spots for students to come in, certain doors, and then also certain stairwells that they're going to be using. Students will be, we won't be having the normal openings that we've had. The students will be able to trickle in, but using certain certain areas. The thing that's going to be difficult for us is that our parents are used to coming into the buildings all the time, and that we're not going to be able to do that. And so we're going to have to limit that so we don't have as many people in the building. But yeah, our building principals, and that's part of those orientations and what communications coming from the principals about what doors to come in and what time.
Great. And how in general do you feel like the teachers are feeling?
So I would say that there's obviously, as I said, there's fears. And what we have to do is make sure that we're quelling those fears as much as possible by putting in the risk mitigation measures. And you know, I'm hoping that by time students are back in and we're seeing how the procedures are working, they'll feel better about it. But I mean, the reality is people are scared, and I have to recognize that and try to make sure we're doing everything possible to do everything to mitigate those risks and have people know the procedures, and also recognize that people do have fears. And so I was going to say that when you're talking about thanks, what I would say to anyone who's watching this, or anybody on the board, writing a thank you card to our teachers have been the true heroes through this whole thing. The administration's been working to do the setups and get the structures in place, but it's our teachers who are on the daily basis teaching like this every single day. And if a small note to our teachers goes a long way. So I would just put that out there to the public.
Yeah, and I want to reinforce what you said earlier about how the distance learning so far since the start of the school year, from our perspective, has been incredible and night and day from the experience in the spring. So thank you to all of my kids' teachers and all the teachers in the district.
Amy or Caitlin, anything? Caitlin, go ahead.
Thank you. I know the students are very appreciative of the administration and the teachers' work. I had a question if we're still looking at an 8 to 3 school schedule or a 9 to 2 school schedule.
So for the high school, it will be we're still working on the schedule actually. And so it will be more, when the students get back, I do know that it will be a blocked schedule, similar to what you're doing right now, so we can minimize the amount of transitions in the hallways. So, and Melena, I don't know if you're there, if the schedule, I think we went back to
yeah, we will be on a block schedule, but we're looking at going back to a more traditional start and stop time at the secondary level when we start to transition back in.
Thank you, Melena.
Thanks. And Amy, did you have anything?
Sorry about that. No, I mean, just thank you, Sean and team, for all of your hard work. And I will echo what others have said, that it's, for us, it's been a really positive experience, and my kids are happy and thriving, and they are, the teachers have been wonderful. So it's been tough for the, all around on a bunch of different levels, but we certainly appreciate all your efforts.
And I think we do have to be cognizant of our students, because this is going to be very different. They haven't been in a classroom environment for over 6 months. And so when we get back to it, there's going to be some adjustments, and we're also going to be mindful of their emotional level during this transition. And so we will be cognizant of that at school, but also want our parents to be cognizant of that as well.
Sean, and I will say, I will add my thanks to you and the staff, to a great job. I think one of the questions that I continue to hear, and I just think it'd be good for you to answer it for the public, is the utilization of outdoor spaces. We read articles about what other schools are doing with outdoor spaces. So I'm just wondering, what's the thinking? I know it's getting colder and that gets harder, but can you speak a little bit just to that utilization of outdoor spaces?
Yes, so we have encouraged, we've actually, for the elementary level, built in more times for students to get outside. And so it's not necessarily recess, but we're calling it like outside inquiry. And so we're building it into the schedule so that way it could be used for recess or it could be used for class time. And then our schools are also designating spaces that are in their areas that they can sign up. So so that way we're trying to maintain our social distancing and staying with our class pods. But there's time, like for example, at Merrimack, they designated spots throughout the campus and even closed off a back part of the back of the school, like where the street circle is, and those spots are designated where teachers can go onto a Google Doc and be able to sign up for going outside. And so so we are looking at outdoor spaces. We've tried to look at whether or not tents would be necessarily. Some of the schools have overhangs, but we have also trying to protect our space too by, for recess as well, because we still want to have recess. We want to take up all the recess space for with tents. So I feel like what we'll do is start the way we're starting, and then if we need to add additional type of like those kinds of things like tents, we might consider that later on down the road.
Great, thank you. And again, thank you for your report. So I think we are going to move on, Caitlin, to you, to student board rep update.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for having me today. So I will start off with talking about how tests and quizzes are currently being taken at the high school. So increasingly, teachers are turning more toward project-based assessments to evaluate students. Like for example, in my math class, we were given some questions and we had some creative freedom to be able to decide what we wanted to do with the questions, such as video format, presentation format, or like writing and answering the questions in our own test format. Also, teachers are turning towards open note checks that are either taken asynchronously or synchronously. And this is usually through Google Forms, or math has also been using a program called Edulastic for specific equations to be input online. And for the tests that are not open note, these are usually taken on Zoom during the class period with cameras on and microphones on mute, with the cameras sometimes facing a little bit downward so that the teachers can see the students' desks. And in addition, if the tests are closed note, then some of the classes will require that Chromebooks have a lockdown browser. And moving on to music department classes, the music department has had an especially unique time trying to move online. It's very unconventional. So the way that music teachers have been doing it is that for assignments and assessments, these are usually in playing test form. When recordings are sent through Google Classroom, this is usually done through audio recordings or a program called Screencastify, so that the teachers can also like see students' fingerings on the instrument. And group band and orchestra music is being played on mute, but it's followed by the teacher having a metronome in the room and an assigned player so that the students can follow along. And there are also breakout rooms with individual practice time, where the students can either choose their music or the teacher will assign music and then pop into the different breakout rooms, have the student play for them, and then give feedback. And on the side of the District Advisory Council, we have established the High School District Advisory Council. We've been meeting once a week to once every 2 weeks. And we have also reached out to the 7th and 8th graders who were recommended by teachers to be part of the middle school or White Downs District Advisory Council.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So we are going to move on to, we have 2 study items, an information item, some action items. We got a little bit of everything in this meeting. And so our first study item is 10.01, and it's a first reading of policy ACA, which is around sexual harassment. So Robin and Tony, you guys are up.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everyone. As Joe just mentioned, tonight is the first reading for policy ACA. And policy ACA is related to sexual harassment under Title IX. So while Title IX is more popularly known for expanding athletic opportunities for female students, the U.S. Supreme Court has found that public school districts violate Title IX if they are deliberately indifferent to known acts of sexual harassment in the district's programs and activities. Also, alleged victims of sexual harassment, also referred to as the complainants, can sue school districts under Title IX for damages if the harassment occurs while the district exercises significant control over the alleged harasser and the context in which the alleged sexual harassment occurs. Based on some growing concern regarding sexual harassment in education, particularly higher education, the U.S. Department of Education issued some new regulations in 2020 that prohibit school districts from disciplining an employee or a student accused of sexual harassment prior to the completion of a detailed grievance process. So policy ACA provides the required grievance process outlined in the U.S. Department of Education's regulations. To help answer some of the questions that you might have this evening, we've invited Michelle Basie from Tuaskini to help support the answering of some of those questions, as this new policy is quite complex, and it requires us to change some of the procedures that we have previously had in place as it relates to sexual harassment investigations.
Great, thank you. I think I'm just going to call on folks so we can just go down, just to be more efficient. So I'm going to call on people as I see him or her on my screen, which means Kim, you're at the top left. So do you have any questions?
No, I actually talked with Amy a little bit about this before the meeting, so I'm going to defer my questions to the counselor on the board. Thank you.
Gotcha, thanks. David, how about you? Do you have any questions?
No, I'm in the same boat.
Okay, all right, Counselor Rubin, do you have any questions?
She has a few.
So, I mean, I guess the first thing is that, obviously this policy is a pretty, it's a different interpretation of sexual harassment, and that it's a very narrow, they're changing it so that it's the standard is, or it's so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive. So that is, for me, I would rather there be a lesser standard than that. That to me seems to indicate that, if it's just one instance, then that doesn't qualify as a violation under Title IX. So I guess, I understand that we need to adopt this in order to retain our federal funding, but I guess most importantly, I mean, we still have that policy AC, and how are we interpreting AC in connection with this policy ACA? And so I guess, like, if we have more stringent requirements in policy AC, does that somehow affect our federal funding? So that's my first question.
So the Title IX regulations contain the specific definition of sexual harassment that appears in this policy. And it does reference the severe, pervasive. It's kind of a continuum, right? So there may be an instance where conduct is so severe that that one incident could be enough to fall under this policy. But more broadly, I think what you point out about policy AC is correct. So policy AC remains, is still in effect. And so what would happen is, when you get a complaint of sexual harassment,
the first step would be determining, does it allege something that falls under this policy? And if so, this specific set of procedures applies. If it does not, then your policy AC, if it's lesser, and policy AC has always prohibited conduct that may be less than what constitutes illegal harassment, right? You would still follow your procedures under policy AC. So lesser would still be prohibited. It's just this specific set of regulations is specific under the to what they have defined as sexual harassment in the regulations.
But anytime a sexual harassment claim is brought, don't we sort of have to assume that it would be, it could rise to the level of a Title IX claim and investigate it in that way, and then therefore, do you know what I'm saying? How do you, especially with this new compliant, I don't know, compliance officer that's a lot of burden on him. And how does somebody make a claim, and us as a district, do we just say, you know what, we're going to assume that this isn't a Title IX claim and we're just going to proceed under policy AC?
I think it's going to depend on what this specific allegation is. And a determination is going to have to be made at the beginning. And yes, if it possibly falls under this policy, then it would likely need to be investigated under this policy. You may get a complaint that just clearly does not fall within the definition, or where clearly we may still want to address the conduct as a district, but it clearly is not under this this specific procedure.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of lawsuits that have been filed that are challenging it. So I think it's something that we want to follow those lawsuits and stay abreast of it.
For sure.
Amy, other questions?
And this policy does pretty closely track the language of the regulations.
Okay.
Did you have other questions, Amy, or no?
No, keep going.
Okay. Caitlin, did you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Jason, any questions?
It just, reading the policy kind of, it was kind of odd that it's kind of like repealing some things that were actually helpful for victims. And it gives a lot of power to the schools. There were a few questions I had, but I wrote them down in my car, so I don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Stacy, any questions?
No, my notes kind of mirrored Amy's. That phrase about it being severe or pervasive just seemed so subjective to me. And I wasn't comfortable with how you determine that, but you kind of answered that when you talked to Amy and referenced policy AC. So thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. And Counselor Pearson, not to be, our other counselor, questions?
Thanks, Joe. I guess, Michelle, I guess if this is maybe a way that we could focus the question. It seemed like from the summary, which I'm sure you helped us with, the reason for this change is, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but the way I read this kind of summary was that the reason for needing to change this policy was because of new guidance issued by the U.S. Department of Education that is prohibiting us from disciplining employees accused of this without this grievance process. Like, unless I missed something, that's the whole reason this is on our agenda tonight. Is that right?
The Department of Education issued new regulations in May that became effective in August, that set forth new procedures for the investigation and determinations related to sexual harassment under Title IX, as they relate both to student-on-student sexual harassment and employee-on-student sexual harassment, as well as employee-on-employee sexual harassment. So, and this policy, which is drafted by the Missouri School Boards Association, is in response to those regulations. And the procedures in this policy track the requirements of those regulations. So previously, most of the Title IX guidance from the Department of Education was issued pursuant to just Dear Colleague letters, so guidance, right? And it changed over the years. These actually went through the rulemaking procedures and our formal regulations.
Okay, so I inadvertently used the term guidance instead of regulations. It sounds like I actually hit on something there.
But it's actually a significant change in Title IX and how Title IX has been treated throughout the years. So there's been a lot of back and forth in prior years, depending on the governmental administration at the time with respect to Title IX in guidance, and then now these are actually regulations, and then it is, a lot of the preamble information in the regulations does address, it certainly addresses, ensuring that victims' rights are protected, but it also addresses this idea of due process for those who are accused of sexual harassment. And so these regulations, according to the Department of Education, are meant to balance those two issues.
Okay, so I'm sure you can probably, I'll take a crack at it, but you'll probably do a much better job of cleaning up my explanation of it as to why that's important in terms of when a government agency, a federal government agency, issues regulations, the ability to change or modify that and the timing that takes is very different from informal guidance or dear colleague letters or those kinds of things. So this has a more lasting impact in terms of how districts like ours have to address this, like kind of on the ground. Am I summarizing that well?
That is correct. Barring, as mentioned, there have been lawsuits challenging the regulation. So barring some type of court order, about the enforceability of the regulations, then yes, this has gone through a much more, the regulations are binding and much harder to change than just issuing a new Dear Colleague letter. And like I said, and this policy the regulations are pretty detailed and elaborate with respect to the definitions of sexual harassment, the different roles that institutions have to have, who can play those roles, and the investigation procedures, appeal processes, and this policy basically just tracks the language of those regulations.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your explanation and expertise on this.
Of course.
Joe, can I just say one more thing?
Go ahead.
Follow-up question, sorry.
Go ahead.
So is Cameron, he's gonna be our designated individual that's gonna do the investigations?
Cameron would be the Title IX coordinator, so he would
Right.
not necessarily be the one doing investigations. He would be the one that would receive the Title IX complaint and then help determine if that was indeed Title IX or if we maybe need to pursue under AC.
And then are we going to, who's going to be the decision maker then that's referenced in the policy? It would be great. It seems to me like it should be an attorney.
Right now, what we were thinking and what was recommended to us is that Robin would be the decision maker typically for anything that was student related, and I would be the decision maker typically for something that was staff related.
And then we also have a couple different options available to us as to who serves as the investigator. You know, the investigator, whoever is the investigator, could also possibly be the coordinator, but we are looking at the other options, which would be to have an outside person be the investigator. So that could include looking at a law firm to conduct an investigation. We could look at using a retired administrator to play that role, or train people internally like other school building based administrators to play that role.
I mean, okay. So Michelle, what do you think about having an attorney acting as the decision maker as opposed to exposing Robin or our own people to?
Well, certainly, I think that the whole process can be done in consultation with an attorney. I do think that there might be situations in which you might have an external investigation where that might be appropriate depending on the nature of the allegations, but generally that would be the fact finding sort of process. And then you know, it is typically we've not when doing, obviously we assist with all sorts of investigations and sometimes do investigations for school districts, but typically ultimately it is the institution that makes the decision about, you know, whether a violation has occurred. We can certainly look at whether it would be appropriate for you know, an outside attorney to do that. I think ultimately the district would want to still, though, be comfortable with that decision. I'm not sure you want to give up that control either.
A question for you.
About that.
It seems like, well, going back to so this is great. So the institution can now make a decision. This is very subjective. I mean, someone can literally argue whether or not it was real or true or not, which is exactly what the current administration and Betsy DeVos wanted. So it's very complicated for someone who is, you know, a victim here to say something happened to them, and then we have to make that decision. Either put the onus on us to make the decision, or better yet, the administration, that is, in particular, Rob, Cameron, and Tony, to make a ruling on whether or not it is deemed a certain level. I think that's tough. I think this is a bad situation. And the downside is, Michelle, is that we gotta accept it, right? Like, we gotta accept it. I mean, there's no other way around it. Right?
The regulations do require the adoption of a policy that is consistent with the regulations, which includes the language that is being proposed. It's certainly there is, you know, there is a requirement that right away, right, when there is a complaint of sexual harassment, whether or not the complainant or the alleged victim wants to file a formal complaint or not, and proceed with an investigation or not, supportive measures the district can and is required to implement what they call supportive measures for both the alleged victim and the alleged respondent, to make sure that both parties continue to receive equal access to the education. So there are certainly, the district can certainly take steps to make sure that as you mentioned, the concern for the victims, that victims, you know, feel supported, feel safe, can continue to access the educational environment. But the procedure is certainly going to be different going forward.
Way different, to say the least. And I'm just thinking about like, if I'm just saying, like, this is a tough situation to be in. If you're a woman and you make a claim, and of course now men, harassment happens to them as well. So I'm not saying this is excluding men or others, right? People who identify as something different. But I'm saying women, if women make a claim, it's easily, I can argue the fact that I was like, one of the things that one of the items read that like the perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator, can reach out through a note, I think it is, and can find out who that person is who made the claim. I mean, it puts the victim in a messed up situation. It's like, why would I want to come forward and say anything? But anyways, it is what it is.
Yeah. So any other questions or comments? I mean, I will say I agree. This does not seem like a very victim-friendly procedure that has been handed to us, but I'm not sure we have, unfortunately, I don't think we have much choice.
One more thing, just going back to Cameron. So Cameron now has a full plate. I mean, his plate was already full, but now it's going to be even more full. Was this by design also, that when we hired him, that he would be taking this over, Sean? Taking this responsibility on?
No. So basically, when we were looking at what would be the best process to use when we're thinking about the decision maker. So it's like we were trying to think about who else could then make that decision about whether or not this is going to be investigated by on the student end or the teacher end. And so the work is really going to be done by Tony and Robin, but Cameron is going to be the first person who's going to be able to be the, and I forgot the term.
Title IX coordinator.
The coordinator.
And so, so it was a way for us to make sure that we were covering all of the roles that were necessary as part of this. I'm hoping that this is not going to be something that's going to take up a ton of his time, because we're hoping that we're not going to be having claims like this. I mean, I'm hoping that this is far and few between, that we'd have to deal with these investigations. But yeah, that was our best thinking in terms of having Cameron be that coordinator who then could then delegate that to Robin and Tony as the investigators.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Michelle. We are going to move on to our next study item, which is 10.02, the first reading of policy GBAD, which is telework. And I guess, Tony, that's you.
Yes. All right. So good evening. So policy being reviewed tonight is the first read of policy GBAD, telework. And this is a new policy for consideration. Telework became the expectation suddenly during COVID-19 pandemic. In anticipation of more virtual classes and with new technology, more employees may be able to work remotely in the future. This policy outlines the expectations that teleworking employees will be held to the same expectations as other employees and are expected to follow all the district policies, procedures, and supervisor directives. This policy is not required, but is recommended.
Thank you, Tony. So I'm actually going to go in reverse order, which means, Gary, you're first.
You caught me off guard a little bit, but I don't think I have any questions, even with more time to stall on this one.
Great, thank you. Stacy, any questions?
I did, but I can't find my notes right now. I'm sorry. Can you come back to me? Hold on.
Yeah. Jason, any questions?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Caitlin, any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Amy, any questions?
No, thank you.
David, any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Kim, any questions?
No questions, but I can already see the end of snow days in our future.
Yep. Stacy, you want to coming back to you for questions?
That's so funny, Kim. That was what I wrote in my notes. Will this affect days off like that, and then how moving forward does that then in turn affect our instructional minutes and things that we're required to go for the state?
Yeah, it's a great question, Stacy. And I think this type of policy could allow us to look at snow days differently, but it doesn't necessarily mean that would drive the decision for snow days to be all teleworking or that sort of model. I think that'd be a different conversation.
Gotcha. Stacy, any other questions?
No, thanks.
Okay. And Jason, just coming back to you. You said you no questions for them, but still no questions?
No, not yet, no.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Tony. We appreciate it. So we are going to move on to our information item, which is 11.01. It's the 2020-2021 curriculum review cycle. And I might just note that this is really meant to be an information item. So Milena is going to share with us kind of her thinking about the process. This is not the curriculum itself. It's thinking about the process. So Milena.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening. So we are starting a new curriculum review cycle, and the groups that are up within the two-year self-study are math, science, and then engineering. And because we share a coordinator, engineering has a coordinator who's he's in charge of engineering as well as all of career and technical ed. He's oftentimes in a cycle with the board that's sort of never ending. So we decided to put all CTE together with engineering as opposed to breaking engineering out. So there have not been any real substantive changes to the process in more than 7 years. And so because this new group is starting through the process, we thought this might be a good time to look at making some changes. We wanted to make sure to honor the board's role and acknowledge that we were devoting a lot of meeting time to curriculum. And so the new process would still allow the board to stay informed with the trends in curriculum and our work to constantly study and make change while not taking up too much meeting time. So some of the highlighted changes that we're looking at in refining our process is a more intensive study phase. So really thinking about the documents that guide our work within the district. So the principles of teaching and learning, the strategic plan, the profile of the graduate, your anti-bias, anti-racism resolution, as well as the presuppositions that we're working on, doing crosswalks with those to cast a critical eye on where we meet up with district philosophies and where we need to improve within the different content areas. Looking to add a stronger voice from stakeholders, so parents, students, and staff. So looking at ways to, what are the kinds of questions that we want to ask, the kinds of information that we want to gather to help influence our study. Then identifying our driving questions and informing ourselves through literature, practices, and successes of others. So studying what others are doing to be able to know how that informs us. So all of that information would then help us to develop our goals, plan our professional development plan, and then make change within each of our content areas. So in order to do all of this, most of our work would take place within our curriculum committees. So using our staff to study and then looking to get voices within that. What had typically looked like 2 instances where each coordinator would come to the board table would look like one written report to the board early in the process as a memo, and then a final report as an informational item in the spring of the 2nd year before we adopt our long range goals. Other than that, I feel like the things that I outlined for you in the executive summary sort of give you a pretty good idea of the steps that we're looking to take within the process.
Awesome. Thank you, Milena. So, I mean, again, this is an information item, and we thought that because we have historically spent so much time, or at least in the last few years, on curriculum, and Melena's kind of coming up with another process, we wanted to give the board a heads up. And I will say thank you, Melena. I think I think it looks good. And I think it will give us both the opportunity to engage, as you say, but also give us some space for some other things
Right.
on our agendas too, which is good. So does anybody have any burning questions? Because really, again, this is really just a heads up. This is, more to come here. Any burning questions for Melena, or can we move to the next thing? Okay. Thank you, Melena. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we have 3 action items tonight. I said we've got a smorgasbord of a little everything in this meeting. So our first action item is 12.01. It's the 2021 Employee Benefit Plan Renewal. So Gary, do you
So
have
can I say something before you go into that?
Sure.
Mary Jo noticed something on the write-up before we go into this. It was a rounding mistake, and I wanted her to just to point that out before we go for an approval. I just want to, I don't think it's going to be a significant change, but Mary Jo, if I wanted you to explain it before the motion went forward.
Okay.
Yep. We were updating the benefit website where employees actually enroll, because we get to start working on it once this gets approved. And we noticed it's actually set up through a formula, and there was still an override in it from last year that we didn't take out. And so the narrow network option, so there's 2 different plans. The narrow network option had an $8 basically rounding error that ran through every calculation because the starting point was off. And so we fixed it, and it only changes it slightly because there's only like 30 people enrolled in that plan. And so it's less than like $1,500 for the entire year difference. So, but we just wanted the correct rates approved, because if they're not approved, we can't move forward.
So so the correct rates are, but they're not in the action item, but so
Right.
what how are you incorporating those rates?
It approves the attachment, and so it's in the attachment correctly. So, but it doesn't change any of the percentages because it was so minimal. So, it's a less than $2,000 change on a $4 million budget item. So it's extremely immaterial.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Awesome. So Gary, do you want to go ahead and read the action item motion, please?
Sure. 12.01, I move that the Board of Education approve the carrier recommendations and respective rates representing an overall increase of 3.8% for the 2021 calendar year as presented, and authorize administration to negotiate and execute contracts for the same.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Thank you. 12.02 is the 2020-2021 budget revision.
12.02, I move that the Board of Education approve the 2020-2021 budget revision requesting a $555,300 increase to the 2020-2021 capital fund operating expense for the installation of a needlepoint bipolar ionization system, and a $43,700 increase to the 2020-2021 capital fund operating revenue for the reimbursement of the Center of Clayton's portion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions on this one? Go ahead, Gary. Yep.
Just I guess maybe an opportunity for staff input on this. We have had some questions about this kind of equipment and things that are being done all over indoor spaces to address indoor air quality. And I don't know if this would be a good time for addressing some of those questions that have come up on this particular technology and thing that we're buying here to address that. But I just want to at least acknowledge that that's been something that we've gotten some questions about.
Mary Jo, you want to speak to that, or Sean, you want to speak to that? One of the two?
Yeah, I was going to ask Mary Jo to speak to it in terms of having a little bit more knowledge about it. But basically, it is another layer of protection that we're looking to improve indoor air quality. I'm not exactly sure about all the ins and outs about how it works, but I'll defer to Mary Jo to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. So there's been a couple questions. A lot of it has to do with either air filters or opening up the windows. And so, you know, and then versus using this system. And so we're looking at the district as a whole, and not all the windows can be open. Replacing an air filter in an HVAC system is not as simple as just saying we want a HEPA filter within a system. So any system has to be designed when you think of it as a commercial grade system like the ones that we have. And then we also have so many extensions in our buildings that, like Captain alone has 7 different units in it, and Wydown as a whole only has 7, because Wydown was built at one time where Captain continued to have additions on it. So you can't just change a filter into a different filter. The filter has to be designed for the system. And so we do have very high quality filters in our systems, and the systems are designed to maximize outdoor intake, as well as managing the temperature and humidity, because if you bring in too much outdoor air, you will get too much humidity, which will cause mold and mildew and make the building and its occupants uncomfortable. So the needlepoint bipolar ionization system that will be attached to the existing HVAC system converts the air into charged atoms, and then they send it back out to cluster around microparticles, and basically it deactivates harmful substances like airborne mold, bacteria, allergens, viruses. So they're charged atoms, and they also attach to expel breath droplets and dust particles that can transport viruses. It can also enlarge different substances so that they're more easily caught in the filtration system then. So it also actually increases the efficiency of the air filter. So there's lots of positives with it. One of the negatives that people have gotten some comments about is related to ozone levels. And so there's 2 different types of bipolar ionization systems. There's a corona discharge system, and then the needlepoint bipolar ionization. And we only bid the needlepoint bipolar ionization system because this system does not create harmful levels of ozone or off-gassing, which is another issue. So this system actually reduces off-gassing, and off-gassing is basically the smell, like if you think of a new car smell. So any type of manufactured items, a foam mattress or anything like that, it helps, they're called volatile organic compounds, and it helps reduce those scents and other smells that might come into, it won't eliminate them, but it'll help reduce them. But it also, the newer needlepoint, their modules they've been upgraded, and in 2017, there's been ozone testing, and it's a UL 867, whatever that means. I'm not an expert on that. I just know which one it is. But basically, it minimizes it to 0.05 parts per million of volume, which is an acceptable level of ozone that is naturally in the air to begin with. So this system does not create any ozone, and it also helps eliminate off-gassing, which was the concern with some of the comments that we had received.
So, I mean, just to follow up, Mary Jo, if that's okay, I guess in the overall context of the topic of how are we addressing the quality of our air inside our buildings, I heard you mention a number of things that may have been suggested in different contexts that we may or may not be able to do. But just in the focus of the action item that's in front of us, like this actual purchase, this system, it seems like the concerns are, does it actually do something that's beneficial, and does it create some kind of not beneficial byproduct like the off-gassing or whatever else might be. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking about those things in the context of this purchase. It's obviously a very large purchase, and it's off our budget. So are you I mean, just to focus it that way, I don't want to at all pretend that I understand anything about how this technology works, but I do want everybody who ultimately has to help pay for this to understand that we've gone through the process of evaluating what this product is that we're purchasing and why it's going to do something that's good for us. Does that make sense?
Can I add on to that? Gary, that's a good question. I think last time when you brought it up, we talked about it, I was like, does this stuff really work? It reminds me of a time when these guys were selling these cigar filter things that I would put in this shop that I had. Come to find out, it didn't really work. There was no exhaust. I paid $5,000 for that. For me, that was a lot. So I guess my question is, though, is there any proof that this stuff works?
Yeah, and you could probably always find one study that'll contradict a different study, but there hasn't been any studies that said they haven't worked. The studies basically shows that there's an increased level of ozone in the air, and those are on the older models, not on the newer ones. And this technology is being used in hospitals and airports in order to improve the air quality. And so they're tested at like 99% to kill the SARS virus and the COVID virus and various viruses, where the HEPA filter systems or any type of air filtration systems, they have to be in an enclosed environment. So if you start inviting in outside air by opening a window, or if the door gets opened and it's no longer, those systems have to be set for the spaces that they're in. So if the size of the space changes by a door opening or a window opening, then it's no longer as effective as what it states. So if those HEPA filters state that they would be 99% effective, and you change the flow of the air in the room, it actually lessens the effectiveness of that. So every system that you can look at, you can find positives and negatives in. However, this system, the only negative that they're talking about is the ozone, and it is not associated with this system.
Hey, Mary Jo, I'd like to comment too as well. I think there is one byproduct on the needlepoint side, which it just comes into your HVAC management, that you have a tendency to have an increased carbon dioxide output. And carbon dioxide is interesting because it's not actually something that's measured as an air quality metric by the governing body that does inside air quality testing. And I think Mary Jo touched on it, but about 3 years ago, we retrofitted all of our systems to have essentially a sensor computerized control that pulls in outside air to strike a balance between fresh air and recycled air to cut down on CO2, mitigate, manage mold, mildew type challenges. So when these things started going into place, and by the way, these have been around for about 18 years in this method, right? The Corona version is very old. This has been around for a long time. It's in medical facilities. So there's actually a pretty healthy amount of data behind it. But one of the byproducts is it improves air quality to the point where you naturally might be inclined to adjust to that system to bring in less outside air, because bringing in outside air costs money, because we have to bring it in and condition it to match the temperature and then introduce it. So the less outside air you bring in, the cheaper it is to run. This gives you a desire to decrease that outside air input, but you have to kind of fight that urge because you want to make sure that you maintain your CO2 levels, just so that we don't have any kind of a question around the CO2 level. So I only bring it up because there are some data points floating around on reputable, I say reputable, I'd say engineering blogs as opposed to trade or other weirdo websites that talk about this. Because when I dug into this, what I wanted to avoid is a situation where we jump into a green cleaner that doesn't kill flu. I'm a bring back the bleach guy. And, when I looked at this, I wanted to make sure that it actually works, to Jason's point, that it's not a non-exhausting cigar filter. But the company that makes this is GPS, and they've actually got an independent study finally that shows that they knock out 99.4% of coronavirus in the air. Now, like anything, the longer it runs, the more it kills. The idea here is that it populates the air and over time it brings it down. So it's not a bug zapper. It doesn't happen overnight. But if we have the air conditioning systems running 30 or 45 minutes before kids show up, and we have them running throughout the day, we're going to see the efficacy start to go up on a system like this. And by a nice healthy byproduct of that is it also knocks down flu. It knocks down all pathogens. So, and it actually even reduces maintenance cost on the equipment over the long run. So I know this is probably more than you cared about, Gary, but I've got eyeballs deep into this, and it's a pretty fascinating technology. And I think it's probably the best we could do short of like a full rip and replace. And that's just, I don't think that's a value driven activity, I guess is the best way I can say that.
Keep in mind, we did replace both HVAC systems at Glen Ridge and Merrimack this summer.
Great. Awesome information. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we got a motion on the floor. So all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, it passes unanimously. And I need to recuse myself from the next one. So I'm gonna leave the meeting, and Amy, it's yours for a second here, and you can tell me when I need to come back.
Okay. All right, we are on 12.03, the part-time temporary employment for Sarah Miller. Gary, can I get a motion, please?
12.03, I move that the Board of Education approve the part-time temporary employment report as submitted.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Are there any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously.
I texted Joe. He should be back in a few seconds.
Okay. So we are now moving on to the consent agenda. So Gary, do we have a motion for that?
We do. 13.01, I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda items 13.02 through 13.10.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any comments or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Great, thank you. So we are then moving on to, I'm going to our board communication, right? Oh, yeah, well, no, sorry. I missed one, our public comment. So do we have any public comment tonight?
Yes, we have one public comment, and that comment is from Becky Patel. And she writes, can you address why public comment was moved to the end of the meeting? Our board members sent comments in advance of the meeting. I request that the BOE modify the comment policy under COVID to allow for the public to actually speak in their own voices during the public comment portion of the meetings. This capability is available on Zoom Webinar and other platforms I've used as both a panelist and attendee. I'd like to hear open board discussion about the influence of recent petitions from our community, student-led, teacher-led, and parent-led. Since passing the resolution against racism in our district, what have board members done to personally learn more about how to be anti-racist? That's the end of our comment.
All right, thanks, Chris. So, so now we are moving on to board communications. Does anybody have any board communications? Stacy?
I do. So for one thing, I attended my first special school district meeting as our board representative. And it was kind of an orientation for all the new ones. So not major news there, but they did want all the board members to communicate to the community that before school started, they held town hall meetings with all the parents of kids that are serviced by special school district, different for each school. And that they will be voting on a strategic plan soon. And the goals will revolve around student performance, workforce excellence, engagement with the community, and equity. So that's one. And secondly, I attended the MSBA conference last weekend, and I went to a handful of sessions, but I just wanted to mention like a couple of the big ones. Was I went to hear, and I don't know if any of you went also, but I went to hear Dr. Robert Redfield speak. He's the head of the CDC, which I thought was, first of all, really cool that they got him there. But his main messages to school districts that were takeaways for me, and most of what he's suggesting we are doing, but was to not overreact when we have positive cases as a school district and administration and as a board, to not overreact because fear can be very contagious and create a lot of uncertainty. He also suggested that school districts develop ahead of time a proper response when that happens and how we're going to inform our school communities. And he reiterated, of course, as the head of the CDC, that, you know, CDC is data driven. So that is how they make their decisions. And another session I went to was about hiring a superintendent. And it was led by the Rockwood School District School Board and their superintendent, Dr. Miles, sat on the panel as well. I would say some highlights for me in that session were that it was interesting to hear actually from the superintendent's point of view how the process went. He said, first of all, he appreciated that their board had a unanimous vote, a 7-0 vote in hiring him, that it not only showed the community that the board was aligned, but as a candidate, he felt very supported knowing that the board was aligned in wanting him. And Rockwood had also just completed a strategic plan when they hired him. And Dr. Miles really actually appreciated that, which I know we've talked about a little, but he felt like as a new superintendent, that new strategic plan informed his growth plan and his initial goals that he has for himself. So he welcomed coming into the job with a new strategic plan. So there was a lot more said there, but those were a couple highlights that I took away from it that I wanted to share.
Great, thank you. Any other any other board committee reports?
Yeah, Sean and I both attended the Clayton Education Foundation meeting on, when was that, Sean? September 15th, I believe. And they are doing a lot of great things this year. I think they've received their third installment of the $250,000 Centene grant, which is $50,000 a year. So they're well capitalized and funded for their programming for the year. They are also looking at some innovative things as far as using varsity tutors and developing some new programs, which could result in some pretty exciting partnerships for the school district. What else, Sean, am I missing? Their next meeting is in November. Their Hall of Fame ceremony, I believe, is scheduled for early May, but there'll be plenty of updates between now and then. Sean, anything else?
Yeah, and they also were going to postpone the teacher grants and move those to later in the year, so that way we can better get those and then also evaluate them. And so they're not going to not do them this year. They're still going to have them, but they're just pushing them off, not having them normally do. They normally do it during this time of the year, and so we're moving to spring.
Yeah. And they're also partnering very closely. I'm working on a project outside of the board with them and the Clayton PTO Council to fund an annual food drive. So They're getting involved in a lot of different areas. And like I said, I believe they're a really good partner for our school district and continue to be a good partner going forward.
Yeah, and we are, and Caitlin she and another student at Clayton High School are leading a digital divide initiative in our district. And the Clayton Education Foundation can be a conduit for helping look at some of the plans that they have. And so they've been open to that conversation as well. So it's amazing when we're at those meetings, how many people attend those meetings and are invested in doing such amazing things for the district. It's pretty incredible. And, the other thing I thought was really nice is that they had thank you cards from students who were able to attend camps this past summer and how that experience impacted them. So I just think that the foundation does some things that are really innovative and also give students opportunities they wouldn't normally have.
Yeah, agreed.
That's awesome. Any other board reports? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that the Board of Education adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Have a good night.
See ya.